Hello and welcome to the channel. Now you might have seen a recent video of mine where we were using pedals in unusual ways. If you haven't, then make sure you go and check that one out as well. But for those of you that have seen it, you'll know that one of those tricks was using an EQ pedal. And so that got me thinking after that video about the EQ pedals. And so this is in some way a follow-on video talking about why I think the EQ pedal is the most versatile pedal you can buy and why every guitarist should have one in their collection or in their arsenal for tone chasing. Now this isn't a demonstration of any specific EQ pedal, but for demonstration purposes today the one I have here is the MXR 10-band EQ. But the MXR 6-band EQ or a Bosch GE7 or any other sort of EQ pedal would fit this role just as well. The one I have here is just for demonstrative purposes. So let's get into it. Now I'm going to kind of split this video into two halves. One being tricks and things you can do using it as an EQ. And then in the second half we'll talk about some other little tricks you can use that aren't necessarily using it for its EQ purposes, but for some of its other features. But let's talk about some of the things you can do with an EQ first. Now, of course, the obvious one is just being able to fine-tune and tweak your tone. That's the obvious one, that's its intended purpose, and one that everyone will know, so I'm not going to go into that too much. One thing I would like to say on this, though, is that you can also put an EQ in your effects loop. Doing this then obviously puts the EQ pedal between the preamp and the power amp of your amplifier. And this makes the EQ react in more of a way and lets you shape the amp in the way that the controls on the amp would. But again, very much using it just as intended as an EQ. So let's talk about some of the more interesting things. So as you can see over here, I've currently got it set up in this way. So I'm dipping a little bit of the low end and a little bit of the mid-range, and then boosting a little bit of the brights around the 2K mark. And what this does is it will give you a bit of a single coil emulation even when using a humbucker. As you can see here today I'm playing an SG and I'm going into a Marshall amp, which together without the EQ engaged sounds like this. So as you can hear on the neck pickup it's quite clean, and then when you switch over to the bridge you get a little bit of breakup. With the EQ then like this, and I should note also dipping the volume back just to emulate that slightly lower output that single coils tend to have when compared to humbuckers, you get something that sounds like this. Now, of course, you're never going to get a perfect emulation of a single coil, and if you really want a proper single coil tone, then you're better off just using a guitar with single coils. But in a live setting or at a pinch, I think that works pretty well and just gives you that slightly brighter, chimier tone that you might be after. Also, of course, the reverse is true. If you boost these settings rather than cutting them and use a single coil guitar, you'll be able to push that to a point where it kind of gets you into a bit of a humbuckery territory. The other cool use of this that I think works really well and works even better than trying to emulate a single coil with humbuckers is getting a Gretschy, still chimier, Filtertron sort of sound. So to do this, as you can see, I've now changed the EQ settings. So to do this, as you can see, I'm now cutting sort of around the 400 to 500 Hertz range, as well as boosting up somewhere between 3.2 and 6.4 kilohertz. And that should emulate that sort of nice chimey sound that we expect from a Gretsch with Filtertrons. Doing it with the EQ settings and the SG, it sounds something like this. So again, not quite as good as the real deal, but a really good ballpark sound for, like I said, a live environment or something like that, or say you just have a couple of tracks in a set that you need that sort of sound for but don't want to bring a whole extra guitar, this trick is perfect for that sort of thing. So there's a few extra tricks that you can use on top of just being able to refine your sound in the traditional manner with an EQ pedal. And of course the EQ function itself is also really powerful for other uses, as well as the ones we've just gone through here. As well as emulating other pickups, you can use it to emulate things like telephone effect or a cocked wah sound. And of course anything that you put in front of it can be shaped and refined in a way that you find pleasing. So it can also be a really great way to bring new life to other pedals that you already own. Now let's move on to some of the other things you can do with the extra features on these. And the feature I'm specifically talking about is the volume, because this can allow you to either have a clean boost for solos or even push an amp that's almost breaking up over breakup and into distorted territory. So as you can see, I've now got the EQ completely flat. The only thing I have got up is the volume all the way. This pedal also features the gain control, which can really help with this effect as well. But of course this isn't a standard control across most EQ pedals, so we're going to ignore it for the time being and just use the volume. So with the pedal off, just to remind you, the SG on the bridge pickup going into the Marshall sounds something like this. So just a little bit of breakup. And then if we push the EQ in, it sounds something like this. So as you can hear, that definitely pushes it over into more of a distorted and rocky territory, which is really cool. And you can take this one further and start to emulate overdrive pedals by replicating the EQ curve of them on top of this. And of course, probably the most iconic and used overdrive pedal being the Tube Screamer. That's known for that very prominent mid hump. So if we were to recreate something like that using the EQ pedal, we can get that sort of sound. So as you can see, I've now got an EQ curve that looks something like a Tube Screamer would, and that sounds like this. So using it this way, I like to think of it as like an overdrive, but with way more tone control. Now in my previous video where we talked a little bit about using that trick, I also talked about doing the inverse of that and using it as almost a ducker or a gain reduction, but I didn't demonstrate that. So I'd like to do that in this video. And what I mean by this is that you can use this like an anti-overdrive. So if you have a high gain tone you really love in your amp and then want to be able to drop back to a cleaner tone, but say you've only got a single channel on your amp for whatever reason, you can set up something like this. So as you can see, I've just got the EQ completely flat, but I'm pulling the volume back. Now some of you will be thinking, but this is just like rolling the volume back on your guitar. And you would be absolutely right, it is. But doing it this way gives you the benefit of having a constant defined point rather than having to sort of find it. So I've now got the Marshall dialed into a much hotter tone, and that sounds something like this. And then if we kick in the EQ pedal with the volume lowered, so as you can hear, you can drop that level right back and really clean up a tone nicely as well. And of course, like we showed, doing it the other way and using it to shape an overdrive, you can also shape that clean tone more by reducing some of those things that you don't want. Say you wanted it really clean and a brighter tone, you can take out some of that bass and some of that mids and really get a nice sparkly, really clean tone. So there you go, there's a bit of an expansion on why I think EQ pedals are really great and versatile and every guitarist should have one. Of course, there's endless possibilities of things you can do with this. I've tried to capture my favourites and some of the really useful ones in this video, but of course I will have missed some, so let me know down in the comments what your favourite use of an EQ pedal is. And be sure to try some of these out and let me know how that goes too. Because as I've said multiple times, this is something that all guitarists should own because it's just a really great utility tool for shaping tones and just getting that final little bit to get it nice and perfect. But that's going to just about do us for today. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.